Hello, welcome back to another video. My name is Gemma and today I'm going to be wrapping up all of the books that I read in July. So I'm going to preface this video by saying this was somewhat of an odd month, an anomaly in my normal reading diet palette, and you will see what I mean as I go through. But it was a pretty good month. I read 11 books and DNF'd 1. Of those 11, 6 were physical books, 3 were ebooks and 2 were audiobooks, which is quite a lot more physical books than I usually read. You will see why shortly. 36% of my reading was non-fiction, and if you've been following along you will know that the reason that that number is quite high this month is because I was judging the semi-finals round of the BookTube prize. I did do a video ranking those books. We'll get onto that a bit later, but if you want to see my in-depth thoughts, they are over on that video. Mood-wise, very, very different for me. About 25% was emotional, which that's pretty normal, but then after that we have got light-hearted, informative and hopeful. Now, I do not usually read those moods of reading, so that was quite different for me. Pace-wise, 45% of what I read was slow-paced, so quite a lot of slow-paced books this month, with 27% for medium and fast-paced. Genres. Now, here is where you'll be like, am I sure that I'm watching Gemma's channel? So the most read genre for me in July was romance. Yes, you will see. We'll get to it. Followed up by LGBTQ and then YA, weird, and graphic novel, which is going to explain quite a lot of what this is all about. Page number wise, I read 1 that was over 500, 5 that were between 3 and 500, and 5 that were below 500. So, and star rating wise, I had 2 5-stars, which is fabulous, 7 4-star reads, and 2 2-star reads. So no middle of the roads this month. We had either really good or pants. So I'll take it, to be fair, and you'll understand the 2 stars when we get to them. 1 was really short and 1 was a compulsory read, so that's why I didn't DNF them, because usually I would DNF something that was shaping up to be a 2-star read. So usually I wrap up in the order that I read them, but because I have some like clear buckets this month, I'm going to do it like that. So the first thing I want to talk about is the BookTube prize. So I read 4 books this month for the category that I was reading for the BookTube prize. The other 2 I read previously. So I read American Baby by Gabrielle Glaser, and this is about the post-war adoption system in America, following particularly one mother and her son as she is forced to give him up for adoption, and they sort of spend their whole life looking for each other. It was really sad. It was really informative about the adoption system in America at that time, and it was the sad thing was a lot of the things in this that it referred to, particularly around the abortion laws and the fact that that wasn't really a thing in the 60s, and then women got more rights, it's obviously now being completely undone in America. So we were reverting to pre-60s life in America, apparently, but that is a whole nother issue. Not going to talk about that, but I really enjoyed this. It was such an easy style to read as a non-fiction, and I highly recommend. This was 4 stars. I also read Under a White Sky by Elizabeth Kolbert. This is a science non-fiction looking at all of the things that humanity has done that has caused issues on our planet, and the things we're trying to now do to undo that damage. It was fantastic. As I said, I've got more thoughts on my non-fiction BookTube prize non-fiction rankings video on this book, but really recommend it if you're into science and the planet and that sort of thing. It was really accessible, presented as sort of case studies, and yeah, loved it. 4 stars. The other 2 BookTube prize books that I don't have because I listened to them on audio or had them on Libby was The Groundbreaking by Scott Elsworth. This was about the Tulsa Race Massacre, and I really didn't like this book. The topic was absolutely something I was interested in, but the writing style really grated on me, and the author really made it about his experience researching this topic rather than the topic itself. So it was a 2-star for me. I definitely would have DNF'd that had it not been a compulsory read for the BookTube prize. And the other book, which was a complete shock for me, was A Swim in the Pond in the Rain by George Saunders, which looks at 4 classic Russian authors, short stories that they have written, and George Saunders picks them apart and shows what was good about them and what sort of just analyses the craft and gives you more of a critical sense of these short stories. And I absolutely adored it. It was fantastically written. George Saunders' way of speaking to the reader was magnificent, and yeah, highly recommend if you enjoy reading. So probably most people watching this. So those were the 4 for the BookTube prize. Then let's go on to where my stats got completely skewed versus every other month ever. And this is what happened. So I read volume 1, 2 and 3 of Heartstopper. I do have volume 4 on my shelf to read, which I will probably read this month because they're quite addictive and very quick to read. So I'll tell you what happened. What happened was I went on holiday in July, and as you do, you're in the airport, and though you've already packed 3 books that you're never going to get through in 5 days with 2 kids, and you've got 600 odd books in your Kindle, you still go into the bookshop and you're like, I think I'll buy a book. And this was the one I bought. So I had been listening to the lovely Ange from Ange's Book Chatter talk about these. Her and her daughters are reading these at the moment, and I was like, oh, well, if Ange likes them, maybe I'll like them. Maybe these aren't just for young adults. Maybe old adults can read these too. So I thought, you know what, I'll pick it up. I'll just read it on the plane, and you know, if it's pants, you know, who cares? But I adored it. So if you are unfamiliar with Heartstopper, this is a graphic novel in which we follow our main characters, Nick and Charlie, and it's really about their journey as young gay teenagers in school, what that is like, what coming out is like, and all of the challenges that face them. And they're just really heartwarming cuddles of books. And like I say, you can devour these in a couple of hours, if that, because it is a lot more pictures than text. And yeah, it was delightful. And so yeah, I picked up all 3. I gave them all 4 stars, and I look forward to reading the 4th one in August. So with those out of the way, then the books outside of BookTube prize and my Heartstopper binge, I also read Persuasion by Jane Austen, which I read as part of a read-along that myself and the lovely Jack at Spread Book Choice hosted in July for Jane Austen July. And everybody who took part in that was fabulous. And there was so much commentary and thoughts and discussion. It was an absolute joy to be a part of. And Persuasion was my 3rd Jane Austen, and it's definitely my favourite one that I have read, though the other 2 I did read quite a long time ago. And in this we follow a young girl, Anne Elliot, and she was persuaded in her younger years to give up the love of her life effectively, and then he returns to the scene and we see what happens from there. And it was beautifully comical. A lot of the characters were just deliciously ridiculous, and Anne Elliot in herself was a heroine that you could absolutely get on board with. She was intelligent, she was funny, she was just lovely, a lovely human. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, and I look forward to picking up some more Jane Austen soon, though I say soon, it'll probably be next Jane Austen July, if we're honest, because my TBR is ridiculous. Then I listened to the audiobook of Treacle Walker by Alan Garner. I did a whole review of this. I'll link it below. Yeah, not my jam. Quite weird. I think it's supposed to be folklore-y. I think probably I missed some of the points. But yeah, basically we're following a young boy who has a lazy eye, and one day a rag and bone man comes to his house. His name is Treacle Walker, and stuff happens from there. I don't know how much to tell you because it's a really, really short book. It's 2 hours on audio, so you just kind of have to go into it. But it was, yeah, I think possibly, I think Scott at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot commented and said, perhaps if you were significantly inebriated, this book would make more sense. And I think I tend to agree. I was definitely not inebriated enough to appreciate the weirdness of this book, but it seems to very much be a Marmite book. I think if you like books like Piranesi, Lincoln in the Bardo, then this is going to be more your jam. It just isn't mine. So 2 stars. Next, I read a fantastic book, and it was Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty. This is the second in the Daverbad trilogy, and I buddy read this with the delightful Ellie at Bibbidi Bobbidi Books. And oh, what a great buddy read it was, because so much happens in this. So there was a lot of, are you up to this section yet? We need to talk about what's just happened. And this is one of those rare occasions where the sequel is better than the first book. Quite often, second in a trilogy suffers from middle book syndrome. Not this series. Wow. Tensions were raised, political intrigue was raised, and it's left at a point where it's like, I really need to pick up the third one. So if you're unfamiliar, this is a Egyptian, Middle Eastern set high fantasy. We follow multiple perspectives, but primarily the perspectives of Nari, who is a young girl who at the beginning of the first book is sort of swindling her way through life in Cairo, and something happens and she accidentally summons a jinn warrior who whisks her off to Daverbad. And then we also follow Prince Ali, who is the youngest son of the king of Daverbad. And so we get their 2 perspectives, and they're very different characters, and I love them both. There is definitely a lot of characters with shade of grey, and in this book in particular, the second book in the trilogy, the older prince, the heir to the throne, Muntadir, I think is his name, was absolutely my favourite character. He is definitely morally grey, but I adore reading his parts. He doesn't have a perspective as such, but I love reading about what's going on with him. And it was 5 stars, absolutely 5 stars. If you're into fantasy in any way, or you're interested in picking it up, I highly, highly recommend this trilogy. And then the final book for the month was another buddy read, and that was Black Mamba Boy by Nadifa Muhammad, which I read with the lovely Deborah from Booking with Deborah, and this was fantastic. So a lot of people have Nadifa Muhammad on their radar because she was shortlisted for the Booker last year for The Fortune Men. I think this was her first novel. That may be a lie. Yeah, no, this was her debut novel. And in this we follow a young boy, Jammer. He is a young Somalian boy, and he's having a bit of a rough trot growing up in Aden. Is it Aden or Aden? City on the Somali coast. And he's 6 and he's sort of run around the streets and just lives a really difficult life. And he goes in search of his father and travels from Somalia to the Sudan border. And yeah, this was really, really difficult to read in places. It was really, really eye-opening about the conditions in Somalia. And this was set around the time of the Second World War. So we saw how Italian and British occupation in East and Northeast Africa really affected the African people, and it was a perspective that I knew very little about. And yeah, I highly recommend this if you have any interest in African history or World War II history that isn't spoken about in Western textbooks. This was really, really good. It was also loosely based on Nadifa Muhammad's father, and that was quite interesting. There's an interview in the back of this book between Nadifa and her father, so that was really fabulous to read and understand a little bit more about what came from his life and what didn't in this book. But yeah, highly recommend. This was a solid 4-star read, and I absolutely adored reading it with the lovely Deborah. So yeah, there's that one. So I realised when I was editing that I forgot to mention the DNF of the month. So apologies for the change in lighting and general appearance. But the one book I DNF'd in July was I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. This is a non-fiction true crime book where Michelle McNamara sort of hunted down the Golden State Killer, and there was nothing wrong with this book, but I think I was just a bit maxed out on non-fiction, and I don't think true crime is really my jam. And so it was talking through all these crimes and sort of the evidence behind them and what Michelle was doing at the time. And because she died before the book was published, a lot of it had been pieced together by an editor, and so at the beginning of those chapters it said that this was put together from Michelle's notes, and it felt a little clunky to me. And similar to my comments on the groundbreaking, it felt more about Michelle's research journey than about the story of the Golden State Killer, which I don't think was a massive issue in this book, and I think a lot of people would like it, but it just wasn't my thing. And I got about halfway through and I just didn't really want to pick it up, so I stopped picking it up. So yeah, DNF that one. Like I say, I don't think it was particularly a bad book, I just wasn't in the mood for it and it wasn't really my thing. So yeah, and that's it. That's quite a quick wrap up of 11 books, but mainly because I've already wrapped up the 4 BookTube prize ones and done a solo review for the Treacle Walker and covered these 3 in one. So that's all I've got for you. But yeah, let me know if you've read any of these, and also I always like to know what your favourite books of the month were. Usually they end up going on my TBR because that's the kind of girl I am. And yeah, I hope you have a lovely weekend. I will see you very soon with another one. Bye guys.